So, without further ado, let me begin. Marcia, let me start with you. You have 2 decades plus of experience in emerging market banking, investment management, and portfolio management around the world, including here in Kazakhstan. How do you view the role of private equity in modernization, in economic transformation? What are some of the lessons you've seen here in Kazakhstan and around the world? And why don't we start there to help frame the discussion going forward?
Well, first I want to say good morning and thank you all for being here. This is a very important panel, in fact, because the role of private equity has to be considered within the context of Kazakhstan in the context of modernization. Underpinning everything you said about sustainable development, modernization. Private equity is not a panacea. It's not going to solve all the issues for the economy. However, private equity is a needed source of capital for development. And what's very interesting about understanding the role of private equity is that in countries where local capital markets are not developed, in countries where you have struggling banking systems, in countries where internal capital are not forthcoming, or debt is prohibited in terms of interest rates or etc., private equity investment can be a very helpful alternative to help in modernization. Now, what do I mean by that? Where do we employ private equity? Why is that important? Private equity would be great for privatization assets that are not ready to go to IPO, or when IPOs are too expensive. They're great for corporate restructurings, which is part of modernization as well, because you have to improve your value chain or you become obsolete. And that is some of the issues that emerging market companies have, and countries, is that they cannot keep up with the technology and development. So lower trade barriers, more competition, globalization does require for you to have more of a process-oriented, technology-oriented innovation. So when you look at the role of private equity and how it could be useful to Kazakhstan, what you have to think about, or the emerging markets in general, is how can private equity help you in innovation? How does it help with innovation? What happened in Asia, for example, is that with private equity, amongst other tools, they leapfrogged economically. And this is where private equity can be a useful policy tool for modernization, when it focuses on innovation, when you bring labor and capital, when you help, yes, capital, human capital, to develop and have higher skills, forced by the efficiency focus of a private equity manager or a private equity partnership. Now, we also have to talk quickly when we talk about modernization and the ushering of private equity, and again I say it's not a panacea, it's a tool, is that you have to have a pillar, you have to have a structure where private equity can flourish. That means governments need to focus on the legal structure of the country, political risk, corporate governance adherence, and the ability to understand that when a private equity manager comes in or investor comes into a company, the goal is for efficiency. With that may be loss of employees, but with that also could be the development of human capital, so that skill sets become more competitive in the country vis-a-vis neighbors. The challenges in Kazakhstan, in my opinion, in terms of private equity, is the fact that exit strategies, which are very important for private equity investors, are limited. You don't have a local capital market that is very robust. It's hard to exit through an IPO. So that makes you have to be focused more towards another strategic investor. You don't have a secondary market where developed market PE companies can sell to another PE company an asset that they want to offset. So these two challenges are big, and another aspect is sometimes the returns. The risks that initial private investors will look in the country, the returns are not at the same level of what you would see in a developed market, understandably so. So in terms of, how do we usher in private equity, grow private equity internally, bring in private equity within the modernization context, in terms of policy, it's important for the country to focus on these key initiatives, these pillars.
Marcia, thank you very much.
Jump in here. I want to challenge just for fun, because otherwise we're just going to keep talking. we're talking about private equity as if it's a uniform thing. It's not. So let's just make sure the audience understands. $2 billion investment versus a $10 million investment, very different parameters, very different risk reward, very different strategy. So contextually speaking, yes, oil and gas, gotcha. Yes, processing. But let me give you a little bit of experience of perhaps Brazil. Okay? I remember when Brazil, no one paid attention. No investment banker wanted to go there. Brazil looked at its vast agriculture, land opportunity, and decided to become an agro-tech hub. They maximized the processing of agriculture. They went out and started to have efficiencies in technology, not just creating the next Microsoft, but from seedling development to the processing of being able to develop agriculture, to the ways of getting to product efficiency. There's a lot to go, but they became leaders, and they started actually to grow their internal market. That's going out and buying international companies. I go back to my original point. The government, and you look at KCM and all the sponsors here, have to be focusing as well as in innovation. Private equity that brings in innovation. Innovation is not a fit-all term. Innovation can be the next Microsoft, the next Google, the next agrotech. It can also be processes and logistical improvements within a value chain that makes your company or a small company or medium company or a large company more efficient. And I think that human capital development towards that, strategic partnerships through private equity to transfer knowledge and human capital development, there's absolutely no reason why private equity cannot be a tool for innovation in this country. You have the education, you have the people, you have the want, you have the support of the government. I mean, let's be very clear. You have the AIFC coming out, taking away a lot of the legal risks, ushering a lot of the investment. So I think that innovation is something that we should consider, not just a traditional, let's get another shopping mall. Let's look at ways that we, Kazakhstan, can create a competitive advantage. Brazil looked at that. Asia looked at that. And they leapfrogged economically. Your competitive advantage is one of the agendas that private equity should fit within the policy of government. And I just wanted to make sure we keep that in mind.
You have a comment there.
I think that you see the government actually moving towards addressing some of the issues. Even if we talk about the Astana International Financial Center, the mere fact that they now will be under English law is a huge step forward in terms of the government support. I mean, one of the things we can't make believe that it's not important. It is a game shift for investors. I routinely talk to investors in New York and around the world who say, okay, well, give me more about the AIFC. How can I actually have that English law protection? What exactly are the qualifications to come? They're paying attention and they're sitting up because they want not only the incentives, but they also want the protection. So I think that Kazakhstan is making some inroads. And as far as I remember, in terms of minority rights, Kazakhstan actually increased in the world ranking. Okay, so there's another thing. Let's not get beholden to passé knowledge. You need to innovate your knowledge as well. You need to be up to date on what's happening. Kazakhstan has improved its minority ranking in terms of shareholder protection. Kazakhstan is coming in and saying, for certain sectors within the Astana International Financial Center, we're going to have English law. We're going to give incentives. We're making worker passes to come in a lot easier. You know, there's a lot of very positive moves forward. And, you know, it's very good for the country to actually embrace them because they will provide extra channels of investment into the country. Just think about this. If the AIFC, which I hope is successful, you're going to have more international investors coming in, bringing more knowledge, being part of the policy narrative that you want, looking for auxiliary services, transferring knowledge, and everything we discussed here, from the way you put your shopping malls to technology, is all innovation. It's all innovation. That's why I keep saying not technology, I say innovation. So I think that these type of moves have to be ushered and supported and nurtured. And again, what Blackstone, that I know very well, does and looks for is different than what Ambassador looks for or what Aidan looks for. So let's stop only dictating what external investors want. We need to start creating an environment where internal investors from all levels of private equity investment are nurtured to create an environment of culture. So that's what I think is important. Having that tension is very important. Having that development is very important.